this work is not over. This work cannot be over. Regardless, this work has to continue. It's important to the Department of Agriculture. It's important to American agriculture. It's important if we're going to maintain our position in world agriculture. The work of this commission over the last 2+ years is important. What we're going to do now, though, we'll start with a video that was assembled. If you come to some of the 8 regional convenings, we ask that you just kind of pay attention. There's no new stuff in here, but there are some people who haven't seen it. So we're going to ask for the video to be queued up now. And then after that, we'll kick off with the the final convening. Thank you, sir.
In February of 2024, the United States Department of Agriculture, alongside the USDA Equity Commission, made nationwide headlines with the release of the Equity Commission final recommendations. A culmination of 2 years of work, 6 public meetings, and countless workforce hours for members of USDA staff across the country. A total of 66 recommendations have been presented to the department by the Equity Commission to help address discriminatory practices, closing the racial wealth gap, and addressing long-standing inequities in agriculture. Let us take a look back at the journey of USDA's Equity Commission. In January 2021, President Biden signed Executive Order 13985 on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, and committed to the creation of an Equity Commission as part of his rural agenda.
At USDA, we base our equity effort on 4 very significant pillars. The first pillar is the establishment of an Equity Commission, 15-member commission taking a very specific and very deep dive look at USDA in an effort to try to determine what systemic barriers still exist with reference to our programs and the availability of those programs, and to make recommendations to root out those systemic barriers that do exist.
In September of 2021, USDA announced the intent to establish the Equity Commission and formally requested nominations for membership to the Advisory Committee and Subcommittee on Agriculture.
Sure. Here at USDA, we are serious about our efforts to end discrimination across all areas of the department and to improve access to services for those we serve. That is why we're creating an Equity Commission to hold us accountable and push us further into ensuring that all we do is fair and equitable.
In February of 2022, USDA officially launched the Equity Commission and virtually hosted the inaugural meeting of the Equity Commission Agriculture Subcommittee. Between February and September of 2022, the Equity Commission held 3 public meetings where members presented and voted on recommendations for inclusion in the interim report.
My whole thing is lifting up the farmer, making sure that the farmer is valued for what he brings to the table. We as a commission and ag subcommittee can do a lot, but it's where the rubber meets the road with the farm workers and the farmers. My age-old thing, the trust, the transparency, and the transformation of all that we do.
The 3rd public meeting was held in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. There, the Rural Community Economic Development Subcommittee was launched and officially joined the Agriculture Subcommittee in the Commission's evaluation of USDA's work.
When you work in the Department of Civil Rights, when you work as a civil servant, you have a responsibility to serve the people with justice and equity. And so our role is to advocate for that.
In February 2023, the Equity Commission presented an interim report to the Secretary of Agriculture. The report included 32 actionable recommendations. Simultaneously, USDA released an official response to the Equity Commission's interim recommendations, which provided insight for how USDA will address the recommendations and equity concerns.
This report is very important to me personally and to our underserved and other represented communities together to make sure that these recommendations are implemented correctly, that all of us in different communities speak as one voice and fight as one body.
Shante Washte, Nape, Chiuzapi, which means I greet you with a good heart.
In June and October of 2023, The Equity Commission held its fifth and sixth public meetings.
With the executive order and the statement equity for all. For us and for me, it meant meeting people where they are. And Executive Order 13985 has allowed this committee to stop asking the individual to overcome the structural.
Equity is for everyone. So often the lens is being painted as discrimination or minority-based, but it goes beyond that. It's serving everyone and making sure we all have a seat at the table.
We all bring a certain lens to this work, and that's incredibly valuable to bring at to have at the table at this moment. And having each other here to get to look through other people's lenses as a result of this collaboration is so powerful. It's going to make our work better. And the recommendations that you deliver to USDA make USDA's work better.
Because the work of this commission was long overdue. And the recommendations that we will make a difference. And I believe change people's lives.
As a culmination of analysis of USDA programs and services, research and review of previous USDA commissions and reports, countless conversations with department staff, and welcome input of stakeholders spanning the country, the Equity Commission published and presented their final report on February 22nd, 2024.
So I'm proud today to accept this report. I'm even prouder to accept the challenge this report creates.
Today, I'm filled with hope and confidence that our seat at the table is secure and the needs and concerns of farm workers will be addressed.
Where we march toward equity with accountability, permanence, respect, dignity, all in the mix.
The final report is an attestation to the commitment of the Equity Commission and its Agriculture and Rural Community Economic Development Subcommittees, and their expansive knowledge and expertise in how equity can be integrated so that all customers at USDA receive a fair shot at a prosperous and successful livelihood.
And I'm proud of the fact that this department has had the strength and the willingness and the guts to open itself up. But it is a beginning of a significant journey, one that is incredibly important, and one that not only can provide guidance for this department, but for the federal government and for all governments.
Thank you. I think I should have said that I'm Dwayne Goldman. I'm sorry for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, but I serve as a senior advisor for racial justice and equity to Secretary Vilsack, and it's been a pleasure to work with the Equity Commission since the outset. Couple of things I do want to do. You have some bingo cards out there, and if you notice, as in bingo, there's a free space in the center, but around it are a lot of different agencies at the department. For those of you that complete and verify that you've visited all of my colleagues stationed around the back, your card will be put into a drawing for a couple of, as I understand it, pretty significant gifts, some airline tickets. I'm sorry. Now that I have your attention, they're soccer tickets, okay? Thank you, Dallas. Thank you. But no, seriously, we would like for you to visit those booths and get some information from my colleagues on that. The other thing I have to do is a distinct pleasure. When the Equity Commission started, Dr. Jewel Bernal, who a lot of you know, served as one of the initial co-chairs, did a great job, a bundle of energy, right? A bundle of expertise and experience. And when she departed, she was replaced by a lady of equal energy, enthusiasm, experience, education, And I'm here to introduce Deputy Secretary Sochil Torres Small. Now, before you come, I want to tell you that 2023 was significant for me, right? So 2023, after the 2022 census was completed, that was the first time, and I'm a farmer, a lot of you know that, but that was the first time that I am actually older than the average farmer calculated by the census. It's a fact, right? Something like 58, I'm 61 now, yes. So I'm one of them now, right? But the other thing that was so distinct about 2023 that I had one hell of a 60th birthday gift. It was a day that, ma'am, you were sworn in as the Deputy Secretary to this department. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Soch Torres Small.
Well, I'm just going to continue the love fest for a brief moment here. When you said, for those of you who haven't met me, Dr. Goldman, I thought, who has not met Dr. Goldman? If you haven't, you absolutely must, because in addition to his 30 years of equity experience and work, the last 3 years have been fundamental to the success of the Equity Commission and of so much across USDA. Dr. Goldman, I think of you as a bridge. I think you are always pulling everyone closer together. And that is the hardest job in the world because everyone walks over that bridge. But you make it possible for us to do so much because you are pulling us together at every step of the way. And I am so grateful for that 30 years of experience that led to this culmination, this work in the 3 years that we've had together. So thank you. I don't know about all of you, I teared up with this video. I joined you while you were already long on this journey. And I got to see the benefit of your experience and work to make sure that it continuously gets implemented in the work that we do. So today is a day to reflect and it's a day to celebrate. It's a day to celebrate that work that we have done so far and to recognize that we will continue this book, implementing this book that is on my desk every single day and that is used regularly to continue the work. When I first started this job, I spoke with a farmer from New Mexico who said, you know what? I've never worked with USDA. I've been a farmer all of my life, but never worked with USDA. And he said, it's because I just don't feel like the programs are meant for me. But just recently I was in Arizona and I spoke with another farmer who said a very similar thing. He said, before this administration, I had never worked with USDA. I didn't believe it was for me. But now I am standing here as proof to say that it is for me. And I've benefited from these programs because of the changes that have been made. Until now, until these recent investments proved, as he put it, that USDA programs can be for farmers like him, our programs weren't reaching everyone. But our programs are only as good as they do reach people. And that's what this work of equity, which is for everyone, is all about. Every time I got the chance to see this video earlier, and it filled me with gratitude to get to work with this department alongside the Equity Commission and alongside all of the USDA employees who are now implementing that work. But I want to take a little bit of time to speak the Equity Commission members specifically. If you are an Equity Commission member or an Equity Commission subcommittee member, will you please stand? I don't know if you knew everything that you'd signed up to do when you started. You kind of got that extension halfway through that meant a whole lot more work, a whole lot more travel, a whole lot more getting out the word. But for everyone else who wasn't standing during that, I want to just read a little bit about who these people are. And I'm just going to focus on the original Equity Commission, but I want you to know that the background and experience of the Ag Subcommittee and the Rural Development Subcommittee is just as extensive and incredible. But if you're ever wondering what it takes to be a catalyst for equity, it is the time that was put in over these past 3 years, but it is the lives that have been lived by these people, the experiences that have been gone through, many of which tested your utmost patience and built your strength, that have led us to this ability to fight together to make this change. Whether that's 45 years leading the United Farm Workers, carrying the torch for Cesar Chavez with Arturo Rodriguez, or a career connecting global nutrition to equity for local growers and expansive food systems as ambassador for the United Nations and Earthman Cousin, or Dr. Hazel Reed with his decades of academic experience, perspective, and credentials to our efforts, Tony Stranger McLaughlin's career from USDA Office of Civil Rights to the CEO of Native American Agriculture Fund, President of NAACP Derek Johnson, that rare mix of practical application, economic expertise, and value-added entrepreneurship and fierce advocacy through Dr. Ronald Rainey, the joy of discovery and gravitas of historic perspective from Dr. Mireya Loaiza. Charles Rawls, meanwhile, brought his considerable legal chops to the table, not using his legal mind to tell us what we can't do, but help us figure out how we can. And the DEI expertise of Charlotte Amons, whose career started as a children's librarian. She's the kind of children's librarian who also started a school garden, which fits perfectly here. Both Papi C.S. Hernandez and Todd Corley, who have organizational development, design thinking, and change management expertise, and how they put that change management to use here at USDA. As an operations person, I particularly appreciated Yvonne Lee's laser focus on procurement and her experience from the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights that helped do that. Elizabeth Lower-Bosch as an expert in the core public benefits across all of U.S. government that serve people with low incomes. Rick Smith, who represents the most diversified farmer-owned milk and marketing cooperative, the Dairy Farmers of America. And when it comes to Shirley Sherrod, we've all witnessed the power of her decades of service, advocacy, and reconciliation, her willingness to always hope and always work for a more perfect union. That's what it takes to make change happen. Not just the individual lives led by each of the commission members, but the willingness to then work together with a department that has not always worked with you to make that change. To each and every commissioner, thank you for bringing your commitment. Now, some of you may have been back here in February when this report was delivered to USDA. And for USDA, it was a day of acknowledgement of the issues that so many of our communities face. We acknowledged these issues were raised, we took your recommendations, and we committed to holding ourselves accountable. We talked about the systems we'd set up to make sure that we did just that. And following the summit, in partnership with our Equity Commission members, we held 8 different equity convenings all across 5 regions, which reached, get this, 2,100 people across the country. Your panels and countless conversations to listen and learn more about the communities and how the work that was recommended can better serve people across the country will help show and continue to shape the work that's done. Now, today is the end of another chapter in that journey towards accountability. Today, we're here to show the ways that USDA has taken a very meaningful action in these past 3 years. Now, I want to beg your indulgence for just a second because I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. But for those of you who are farmers, you know that you got to get into the weeds to get the work done. And that is what we have spent this time doing since February. So I want to talk about some of the ways we have implemented this work in the very programs that we deliver now. Now, some of it is programmatic. You'll hear about the $2 billion recently that was provided to 43,000 farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners who experienced discrimination in USDA farm lending programs prior to January 2021. You'll hear about FSA's approximately $2.4 billion in assistance to more than 43,800 distressed direct and guaranteed loan borrowers. But we'll also talk about how we've transformed the loan process to make it easier for farmers and ranchers to get and use loans, whether that's access to online applications or being able to finally pay your loan payments online, or whether it's a rule that goes into effect today to help lower the cost, the collateral that's required to get into a loan, make payments more flexible, and also provide for up to one deferred payment a year if a farmer is facing crisis. But I want to tell you one more thing about that. So the farm loan rule addressed, for those of you keeping score at home, recommendation 18, Farm Service Agency loan programs, but it also addressed recommendation 16F, which is about training. Because before the rule even went into effect, FSA held a training. They held a training with their staff to talk about how this rule must be implemented all across the country fairly. But they didn't just train FSA staff. They also trained cooperators to implement yet another Equity Commission recommendation about including technical assistance and training technical assistance providers about all of our programs. We've also taken on the challenge of county committees and how to make sure as we continue to do this work, we serve people better and make sure that people are served with the experience that is fully recognized. Now, how many of you have met Administrator Ducheneau? Okay. Has he given you his cell phone number? I bet he has. Well, we want to make sure that people can access the administrator even when, and the county committee members can access the support of the administrator even if they haven't met him personally. So we sent out a letter to all county committees with information, contact information for the administrator to make sure that they knew that they had the support of the entire department when it comes to implementing equity and advocating for underrepresented farmers. We also stood up the first ever FSA County Committee focused exclusively on urban agriculture. I got the chance to talk with some of them in Dallas, Texas. When it comes to rural development, we implemented recommendation 59, the Community Facilities Direct and Guaranteed Loan and Grant Program, by establishing a priority points framework in order to better deliver on the work that we are doing and make sure that it's not just reaching the usual suspects, but further reaching the people who might need it most. Then the bipartisan infrastructure came along and there was all of this investment in high-speed internet. And we realized we need to make sure that high-speed internet reaches everyone. So we removed match requirements for Alaska Native corporations, tribal governments, colonias, persistent poverty areas, and socially vulnerable communities for our Reconnect program. That's Equity Commission recommendation 61A for those of you keeping track. Then, was if we hadn't had enough historic legislation in the Biden-Harris administration, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. And another enormous opportunity to implement equity occurred. So when it came to an existing program, the Rural Energy for America program, and the $2.2 billion additional investment, we implemented those same priority points that had been established before to be part of the scoring criteria. And we also launched the REAP Technical Assistance Grant Program to be there for farmers who are trying to think through how they might apply and how it might fit in with their business model. I'm just going to read off the other Equity Commission recommendations that I wanted to talk about. When it comes to nutrition, farm worker nutrition, recommendation 24C. One of the key ways we were able to implement this is through the Sun Meals to Go program that allows people with busy schedules to be able to still make sure their kids have the food that they count on over the summer when school isn't in session. Being able to get access to that, pick it up, and go along their day to continue their work, and particularly to be able to do it to go so that rural communities don't have to have a whole facility, but rather can just have a spot where people pick it up and make it more accessible. USDA has also invested in multilingual communication campaign around those meals to go to make sure that parents know about it and hear about it in their own language. Again, these are just some of the many, many ways employees across the department have worked day in and day out to ensure that everyone has access to this great nation, this great nation is served fairly. This is some of the work that's outlined in here, but there's a whole lot more. And I hope you know that we take this seriously from the secretary down when it comes to continuing the work. The other feeling that I get when I watch that video is humility. Because as a Latina who has the incredible opportunity to serve as the first Deputy Secretary Latina, I often wonder if I'm enough to implement and deliver for my ancestors and for future generations. And in watching that video, I know I'm actually not enough. We all working together are enough. So thank you for being. Well, now we'll, on that theme of being enough together, I have the chance to have a great conversation with the co-chairs and an incredible validator about some of the programs that we have. So I'm going to introduce them quickly, and then we'll start with, actually, as I ask you the questions, I'll give a brief introduction, but you don't need much of an introduction for most of these folks. I'll start just, all of you recognize Earthren Cousin and Arturo Rodriguez are incredible co-chairs for the Equity Commission. But I want to make sure you also know Mr. Willis Nelson. Mr. Willis Nelson, you are a farmer in Louisiana, row cropper, and you do soybeans and corn, right? And you and your brothers run Nelson and Sons Farm LLC. But you've also become, in the midst of the little time that you have when you're not harvesting or raising your 5 kids, you've become an incredible advocate for farmers, advocating for farmers in the White House and also in the state committee in Louisiana. And I would love to hear a little bit about why you're here today, what has made you take on the extra work of being an advocate, and what it's been like working with USDA.
What made me take on the work to be an advocate is first, I was nominated to be on the state committee. Okay, I was nominated to be on the state committee for Louisiana, and I didn't know what it was, none of that. So first person I called was Dr. Goldman. And took him a long time to get back with me, but he got back. So I was telling him, he basically told me that I can't complain about not having a voice of being at the table if I don't take the seat when it's offered to me. And so that got me involved. And I was on the board for the National Black Growers Council, and of course, he the one nominated me to be on that also. I didn't want to do that. So it's just an evolving role of learning what's important and how to be, to express my problems that I have going on, and as a farmer, with letting you guys know what it is also, actually boots on the ground.
Thank you so much. Ambassador Cousin, you've spent your career working on more sustainable solutions for global food insecurity and hunger. And while serving on the Equity Commission, you continually talked about the need to be both idealistic and pragmatic. And I want to hear what that looks like 5, 10 years from now. If we are looking at a USDA 10 years from now, how will the recommendations from this book and the work done since, what will that look like at USDA?
We often talk about USDA having been established by Abraham Lincoln as the People's Department. And there having been little reality to that description for too many of the people who need the services of this department. And so as we look out to the future, a USDA that every American who has any stakeholder interest in the programs, services of the department is unabashed in outreaching to the department for those services because of the responsiveness of the department to every American, regardless of geography, gender, race, or size of farm.
Ambassador, what I love about that is the spirit of welcoming that you're talking about, that someone is unabashed to come and ask for support. Arturo, you've been fighting for that support for a really long time. And you've spoken really powerfully about how the first time you were ever actually invited to USDA was under the Obama administration. And so I think when you signed up to do this additional work, there were a lot of expectations about not what was going to be said, but what was going to be done. How has the Equity Commission met up to your expectations? And what's left to do?
Well, first of all, I think the attitude and the responsiveness that we had from Secretary Vilsack, that in and itself, when he called and asked us and many of us to be on the Equity Commission or another representative from USDA, they were really specific in saying, we don't want this just to be another commission. This is coming as an executive order from the President of the United States. And we want to ensure that equity is not only discussed, but we're criticized, that we're evaluated, we're really analyzing USDA for what they've done with their programs, with their services, and how in some particular cases, they've done some excellent work, but in many other cases and many other situations, they have not reached the expectations, particularly of minority farmers, of women, of small farmers, small operators, and in particular farm workers. And so as a result, I've really seen over the course of the last almost 3 years now, the real changes that have transpired and taken place and the responsiveness that has taken place on the part of the department. And very, very happy about it.
Mr. Nelson, Arturo talked about how we have been making changes these 3 years, and one of them that the Equity Commission has really driven us to do is the county committees. And you and I were talking about that a little bit from your experience on the state committee, and then also from your family, your brother's experience on the county committee. What is that like, and what work do we still need to do there?
I'll speak to my experience on the state committee. It's very again, I didn't have insight on nothing. I didn't know what it was gonna be like. But when I got started after a couple of meetings, I learned a few things and I saw the power that it have. Being on the state committee is a lot of power. You help a lot of people and you basically with ERP, for example, with the crawfish farmers. It went into a drought, came from up here we had to vote to open it up. And, and we was able to help a lot of farmers get relief from that, even with the timber, when we had the drought with the timber, a lot of, it came from up here. And in the past, we didn't know about that. None of us knew about that. We didn't even know it was a such thing that we could do an appeal to the state committee if the county committee not even doing what's right. And on my brother's situation, he was, I think, appointed to be an advisor on the county committee from however it went, but he also would want to be a real member also. But I think we moving in the right direction on that. Just need a little bit more nudging, a little bit more work, because we didn't know we could actually put our name on the ballot to run for it. So I just think that's part of the situation right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Did he run?
No, he didn't run because it was too late. But it was advisory. He was able to be appointed as an advisory to be on the board.
Will he run in the future?
Yes.
There we go.
There we go. Well, to that point, Earthren, so we were talking about this because one of the specific recommendations is how do we get out the word more about county committees? And we were talking about this, that right now we're thinking about how we get out the word and how do we focus specifically on the SD positions. But what I love about Willis's brother's story is that he's looking at one of the regular slots. And so how do we make sure we're getting the word out about the timing for those? How do we make sure people know that you can run for any of the slots and that will increase the diversity? So you're continuing to push us and educate us. I really appreciate that. One of the things Willis also said earlier that I wanted to bring to you, Earthren, is was talking about ERP and how they've worked to make it available to a lot of different types of farmers. And this has been fundamental to Secretary Vilsack's vision, that while we know how important it is to produce efficiently and feed the world, it's just as important to be able to build resiliency with small and mid-sized farmers. And it's also only fair to make sure that small and mid-sized farmers have a fair share of the farm income. I'd be really intrigued, Earthren, about how you see Secretary Vilsack's whiteboard vision walking alongside the work of the Equity Commission.
Thank you for that question. If you have not seen the secretary's whiteboard, just
Who
ask,
has?
who has seen the secretary's whiteboard? Raise your hand. There we go. So he will pull out. The first time I saw it, we were sitting in a restaurant together. He pulled up a napkin and started writing on the back of a napkin and explaining. And I won't go into his entire vision, but explaining the difference between the resources that are provided to large farm versus small and mid-sized farms, and the challenges that addressing that issue have created, and the importance, though, of addressing that issue. For me, that's just the epitome of why this Equity Commission is so important. Because it's not about 16A or 59B. These are people's lives and their livelihoods, their future, their hope. When a farmer who didn't know when they were suffering that there was some place to go, suddenly recognizes and learns that there is help that can keep them farming, then we've succeeded. The department has succeeded. The people who work in this department have succeeded. And that's what the secretary is talking about. Those small and mid-sized farmers who too often the majority of their income is from off-farm labor, not from what they make on their farms. And they find themselves losing their land, as well as they're finding themselves in positions where they must work even harder just to stay on the land. And that just doesn't affect that farm. It affects the entire community, because those farmers are the lifeblood of our rural communities. And as we see main streets closing all over America in rural areas, is directly related to the lack of income for those thousands of farmers who would shop on those main streets. And so the difference, what he is talking about, is not just a picture on the back of a napkin. It is about ensuring that as we talk about increasing productivity of our farms, increasing the opportunity for income, increasing income opportunities on our farms, that is not just about those large farms. That the mantra of get big or get out no longer rules the work of the department. And that makes a difference in providing prosperity opportunities for all.
Thank you, Co-Chair Arthur. I just want to talk about one particular program that for not only myself, but for hundreds, tens of thousands of farm workers in the country showed that this was a different USDA that what we've known throughout the years. And there was one particular program that was implemented called the Food and Farm Workers Relief Program. And many of you know that anytime a disaster occurs in this country, in the agricultural communities, whether it's a freeze, whether it's a drought, crops can't be grown and so forth, the employers oftentimes received relief as a result of that, monetary relief and other types of relief, but farm workers were never included. And so when a disaster occurred like a freeze, I remember every single time that occurred, we had to launch a huge campaign in order to get some type of resources. And it usually would be in the way of food, but that was something. But this time around, when the pandemic came and farm workers were called essential workers, but yeah, we're essential, but what are we getting for it? And when we can't work, how are we being treated? Or how are we being taken care of? Or how can we take care of our families? And so the secretary, deputy secretary, the USDA heard and acted on that particular issue. So the first time in history put into place a program that provided monetary resources to farm workers throughout the country that were impacted by the pandemic and lost wages, lost work as a result of it. And $600 was being provided to them. To see farm workers' faces, the women and men were trying to pay rent, take care of childcare, take care of food in their homes, all the different issues that they confronted. To see the gratitude in their faces, to get that $600, for many of them meant the ability to be able to continue what they were doing or go look for another type of occupation and work. And so I think that really speaks to that this USDA is much different in the sense that it takes action as opposed to just looking at what the problem is and not doing anything about it. And so being a part of this experience with the commission, with the Equity Commission, has certainly demonstrated to us and to our community that there is a lot of hope here. There's a lot of reason to have faith. There's a lot of reason to have confidence. And there's a lot of reason to continue to do what we do in advocating on behalf of all of the different entities that we all fight for. Thank you.
Very quickly, let me just say, I got really emotional and I didn't say what I wanted to say, and that is what the secretary has not done is pitched large farmers against small and medium farmers, but instead recognized that we have an opportunity to change the economics on the farm by providing financial resources to small and mid-sized farmers from a variety of different funnels, including from what they harvest, but as well as for how they harvest. as an example of different pots that could potentially support the additionality of financial return to that farmer. It's not us, them versus us. I don't want anybody to walk out of here and say that Earthrin said, the secretary said. So no, it is about, we need all of our farmers to be as productive and as lucrative in the work that they perform as possible.
That's really, really an important note. And Willis, I'm intrigued about your thoughts on this. Just when you think about agriculture in community and how that means a lot of different types of agriculture and a lot of different types of business models, what does that mean for rural communities and for our ag economy?
Well, I'll speak for me. I'd like to be considered as a row crop farmer. That's what I am. But I also see opportunities for urban small gardeners. That's what they is. Well, you know, I see opportunity for them, and I think there is a very important role for them especially for in my area. I live in the Louisiana Delta, probably have some of the best farmland in the country, but we also in a food desert. I didn't know what a food desert was until the secretary told me on this whiteboard. And I was like, this is a lot. And but now I got an understanding of a food desert, and my state representative, he put me on a board called DARTS. And what we trying to do with that is, and I think we got some money from y'all, but it came from USDA, but we're trying to do to get the smaller person to grow, if it's only a quarter acre or whatever, you know, to grow their own food, know where it comes from and how healthy it is. And they do try to pin us against each other, large agriculture against small. But I think it's enough pie out there for all of us. We all can eat off the same plate, you know, and it's enough room for everybody.
I want to speak just a little bit about technical assistance because it is a wonky word, but Earthrin, as you said earlier, it is not about the numbers or the specific phrases, but rather about people on the ground, helping people on the ground. And how do we make sure that whatever gets done is really translated in a way that reaches people, but also that we're on the ground hearing what's not working well? And how are we building that into the system to make it work better in the future? I'd love to hear from any of you about how you've benefited by talking with someone who knew about a USDA program and what they did that was different that helped you get that resource better. Okay.
Yeah, let me just say, when talking to a small farmer in Georgia, which is where my family's from, and it was much like when you said that the farmer didn't know that they could get assistance. Not that they didn't know, but they didn't know how. And that's what's changed with the number of operating agreements that this department has now developed with different community organizations that can provide that how. That opens up services that were always available, but not accessible.
So again, talking about the program that I just mentioned, one thing that USDA did very effectively with this particular program to ensure that it really reached the people that it should reach is they partnered with a number of different agencies that have direct relationship with farm workers. And so as a result, it wasn't a question of them going out and trying to find, they already had constituencies. They already had knowledge. They already had a good name within the farm worker community itself and knew how to reach people. So I just know about one particular organization within that network of groups that receive monies to be able to distribute this. And within that particular organization, they reached over 122,000 farm workers. Now, that would have never been done before. They distributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to those families to ensure that they were compensated in some particular way. So I think that's something that the USDA is doing in a very effective way to make sure that the resources get to the people, the awareness gets to the people that deserve those particular benefits. Thank you.
Yes, can you repeat the question one more time?
Anyone you've worked with who told you about a USDA program that made it simpler, made it easier to get?
Okay. Okay, yeah, I have to go into a lot of history, but I would start here just recently with ERP2, just came out. It was a big problem in my area because only certain ones knew about it. Well, one particular person knew about it, and we didn't know. But with me being on the state committee, I was able to talk to Mr. Warner personally. And she told us exactly what went on, how it goes, and what went on. So, and then I was able, because even the DC of my parish, he really didn't know how to implement it. So he was able to call back up, get training, find out what's needed to be done. And even with and then we could go on to the farmers outreach. I forget his name, but he does a real good job on just letting you know what's out, what's coming down through the pipeline from USDA, what's the new thing. He go out to meeting people. I would like for him to get more involved with the younger generation, the next generation of farming. But just with that, just the only problem I would have with that, well, it's not a problem, it's just something you need to improve on, reaching out to them more. But I think y'all guys are doing a good job with that also.
Keep the feedback coming. We need that too. That's great. All right, we're gonna get into the dirt just a little bit because I think we've got about 5, 10, 7, 8 minutes left. Okay. We'll do 2 more questions, but we're gonna dig into the dirt just a little bit here. I want to know what the hardest thing was serving on the Equity Commission. And Willis, we'll come back to you with another question, but for the 2 co-chairs, what's the hardest thing serving in the Equity Commission?
Living up to the expectations of Earthrin. I mean, here I'm sitting next to a former ambassador trying to work with all the network of folks and then all the people that we had that were part of the Equity Commission. I mean, so much talent, so much knowledge, so many experiences, and everybody really came to the table with wanting to do something, a little bit skeptical at the beginning, wondering, was this just another waste of time? Were we just sitting on another commission? But we began to network among each other and talk and discuss and see the responsiveness that we got from the upper echelon within USDA with Secretary Vilsack, with initially Deputy Secretary Dr. Jules Bernal, and then with Deputy Secretary Torres Small, we began to say, hey, this is a reality. And so I think then it was to try to capture all the energy and experiences that were in the room so that we could come up with something that we all really felt good about and felt that we were moving the needle a little bit further ahead when it comes to equity. And it was a real pleasure and honor to be able to work with this group and hopefully continue working with one another so that we can do our part in bringing about more equity.
Let me be very honest here, and I'm going to try not to get emotional. Everybody, you read off the biographies of the leaders on this Equity Commission. And everyone who sat in that chair representing a lot of history of the different organizations, of the different communities that they work with, that they're a part of, and that they serve. The hardest part was getting each of those members to trust each other enough that they were willing to compromise to achieve a collective outcome without whitewashing the history of where they'd come from. and everyone was willing to do it. And this report reflects that shared outcome. So getting there, you all, I may have said words that helped, but the action was with each member on this commission and the commitment that they brought to the change that we're helping achieve.
Just, I think, just one other thing to mention. I think all of us on the commission felt very privileged and honored to work alongside Shirley Sherrard. And to see someone, and I think we all know the history in terms of what transpired and what took place, but yet to see Shirley come there, a little bit skeptical like we were, but she came to the table. She came to the table and she saw a transformation being taken place within USDA. And when I saw her willingness to jump in, I said, oh, now we're with a group that really wants to do something and make something happen. So Shirley, thank you so much. You could have left this a long time ago. You could have been totally disappointed with what transpired in your life, and yet you came here to continue to work with us and teach us and to help us understand that in the spirit of wanting to work on behalf of the communities we represent and to do the work that we did, then let's be bigger, let's go high, and let's do what needs to be done. So thank you, Shirley.
All right, one final question, and I've got 3 minutes, I think, so 1 minute each. But we are in a time of some uncertainty, and that is something we are all facing together, just recognizing that, there are decisions that will be made. And I want to hear your advocacy, not for anything in terms of party or otherwise, but rather why, no matter what, equity matters.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to the question you asked at the beginning, how it was like working with USDA. 8 years ago when we first started forming, NRC has always been okay. But FSA, man, you shake your head when you just think about, oh, my application ain't complete, 40 pages. I know I did everything needed to be done. But they'll call you back and say, well, you didn't sign this page. You didn't do this. It was very, very nerve-wracking. But the willingness in you wanting to form, that's what you wanted to do. So you stuck through it, you went through it. And I said all that to say these past 3 years, it's been a breeze. When I think about going up there to the USDA building now, like, it's okay, because when I walk in, they greet you. It's not that you're standing there looking like, what you doing in here, and that's how it used to be. I mean, it's just honest, So I do see a big change, It's still some things that I don't like, but that's gonna be in any growing situation, it's gonna be some things, but it's a complete 180 from where I started. And I think, and this is important, I feel equal, not 100% equal, but I feel like I'm part of the farming community now, with everything, I don't feel like, oh, who you work for. That's the first thing they ask, who you work for. Not that I'm Nelson and Sons Farm, my last name Nelson, but who I work for. Like, that was a problem. And it was like it will make you put your head down a little bit, because feel like you're not equal as your counterpart. When if I had the same playing field, I'd probably be better than them, You know, so it's important that this just keep going to me. And I appreciate everything y'all did. I haven't had a chance to read the book because everyone know I'm a row crop farmer. February is when my season start. And I looked at it and I fell asleep a couple times. You know, but hopefully around Thanksgiving time, I'll be able to look at it and read. But I do see the work y'all got going and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Equity. Before I answer your question, let me applaud you because you came in, Madam Deputy Secretary, in the middle of all of this and jumped right in with both feet and have provided tremendous leadership, accessibility, and an open spirit of communication. And we owe you an amazing amount of gratitude. So thank you. And I would be remiss if I did not give a serious shout out to my co-chair, who was co-chair for the entire 3 years of the commission. And we did not run him away. And he stayed and continued to do the work. And he's always been willing to say, Sorensen, what you think? Knowing he already had an opinion before he asked Sorensen, what you think? But more importantly, that I have never met anyone with a generosity of spirit that is just infused throughout his entire being. You know, you always say about people, they don't have a bad bone in their body. That describes this man. And we've been blessed to have the opportunity to work with him. Now, to your question, how do we build a narrative for equity? For some, no matter what we talk about when we say equity, they shut their ears and close their eyes, and they're not going to hear us. But that does not mean we should not express what equity means to farmers like Mr. Nelson, for opportunity, for farmers who don't look like Mr. Nelson and have been benefited from this department for a very long time, who should see equity as not a threat to their livelihoods as well. FAO says by 2050, we will need to produce 60% more food in order to feed 9.5 billion people. The US leads in production today. For us to continue to lead in production, our farmers are going to look quite different than they do today, because our nation will look quite different than it does today in 2050. And so the opportunity to ensure that we continue to lead, because food security is national security, means that we need to ensure that we have a strong farming community that reflects that population, has the skill set and the access to the tools that they need. And that is what equity does.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. You know, we've all learned, I believe, a lot more about equity over the course of the last 3 years. And there's no going back for any of us. We've seen what can be done, what can be achieved, and I think we all have aspirations of what more we can achieve with equity and more equity. And this USDA has been helping creating a transformation within our food industry. not only in this country, but have an impact beyond our borders. And I think that's what we're all striving to see because of the change that's going to take place. Population increases, demographics, the ways that we do agriculture today, all the different processes that can be developed and so forth that can happen. And so for that to happen, there has to be a lot more equity within our industry to ensure that folks from every particular ethnic group, population, small, large, medium-sized growers and operators, that we can all benefit by the resources, by the programs, by the services that the USDA can make available to us. And Secretary Vilsack reminded us again that the budget of USDA is very small when it comes to the funnel of allocating funds within our federal government. And hopefully that in and of itself, as time goes on, will become more equitable to achieve just right what Co-Chair Cousin has just mentioned to us, that our responsibility for this country, not only to feed our nation, but to also to be the leader throughout the world in food production, and let's do it in a more equitable way.
I just want to close with a story about equity. I was in Schuyler, Nebraska, and it's the town where there's a meat packing plant. And I pulled up at the main street, and often in rural communities, I'm worried about what the main street's going to look like. Are there going to be closed windows, closed shops? Are people going to be out and about? But on this main street, it was alive. It was alive with small local businesses. Now, there were 2 Mexican restaurants on the street. There was a store called the African Store that had imports from all across the continent. And there was a clothing store. And I walked in and spoke with a woman running it, who, when she got there as a family member of a meat packer, she wanted to apply for a job. And they said, you don't have the computer skills to apply for the job. So she went and talked to a technical assistance provider that USDA funds. And she said, teach me how to use the computer. So she got the skills she needed. And then instead of applying for that job, she started her own business and now serves others. She's now a member of the Nebraska or the Schuyler Chamber of Commerce because they've realized the economic engine of their community and they all want to work together for their Main Street. That is how equity builds us all up. That is how equity will provide food for the future, rural communities for the future, and will make sure that everyone who is part of the food system is treated fairly. That is the work, that is the legacy that you all have done. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Let's give those panelists another round of applause. Very good. Madam Deputy Secretary, co-chairs, Mr. Nelson, thank you so much. Hey, look, we're a little bit behind schedule, but I've been told that we have to stay on schedule. Men's rooms are this way, women's rooms are this way. I know that's important. You've been sitting for a while. Men's back here, women's back here. We will start the breakout sessions promptly at 1:45. There's 3 that you can choose from. Enhancing Rural Partnership Models will be in room 107, which is immediately this way. Another one, Transforming the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, is room 104. It's this way. And then Transforming Farm Service Agency Loan Programs, you'll stay put, we'll be right in here. Again, men's rooms, women's rooms, and we'll start promptly at 1:45. You will get instructions for the second set of breakouts in your session. So we're good there. Thank you all.